of questions really. I'm somewhere between both camps, I have to say. I'm swayed by both arguments, but I have to ask Richard, I don't quite understand this concept of a no-money society. I can't see how it will work. You'd have to put something in place to take the place of money. I mean, why would people want to do menial jobs if they're not going to get paid, if they're not going to get any kind of compensation? And there's still an element of exploitation which will come into that, presumably, because it's human nature. And another question for Eamonn, with regards to capitalism. The reason why, at the moment, of course, I don't think we can deny that there's been a lot of money generated, and we're much better off now due to capitalism. But ultimately speaking, if we're still in the minority, can you honestly say that capitalism could work if all 6 billion people on the planet were capitalists? I can't see it possibly could.
Well, I think in China you're going to have 1 billion of them pretty soon.
Well, it's all going to come tumbling down, surely. There's no way that using the capitalist models that we've got at the moment, that the world will survive, even if another 50% of the population were capitalist.
Why? I'm sorry, I don't quite understand.
Well, because of the amount of exploitation. Look at the wealth that we live in here. I mean, there's no way if you actually sort of...
Sorry, who is being exploited?
Well, there's people in this country that's being exploited, and there's people throughout the world that are exploited. I mean, if you actually sort of worked out how much it was that you're getting paid for producing goods. I mean, you mentioned things from Argentina or from Egypt. You know, I mean, the reason why we can afford to have cotton shirts at £1.50 from Matalan is because someone's getting paid pittance for it. If they live in the same society that we live in here, capitalism wouldn't possibly work unless there's someone to exploit. I mean, surely that's common sense. I can't see how it could possibly be. If the whole world is capitalist, it wouldn't work, would it?
Yeah, I find this a difficult argument to explain, because we in this country are all so rich that we think of the world as being almost as rich as we are. And the reality is that, you know, take Vietnam, for example. And everybody complains about how Nike has shoe factories in Vietnam, and they're paid absolutely nothing at all, and they work long hours, and Nike gets very rich, and these people are exploited and kept in poverty. The reverse is actually true. That the alternatives in Vietnam are either that you are working in the field under a hot sun with insects and you name it, not a very pleasant existence, or you can take a job in a Nike factory, and that's what people do, and they're not forced to do it. They do it because it is a better alternative than what they've got at the moment. And you're sufficiently rich that you think, oh, this is outrageous. But for them, it's a step up. And they can get that step up, and then they get a bit of money together, and they can buy a bicycle, and then they can buy a scooter, and then they can buy a car.
As soon as they become a state like Singapore, where they have high earnings, and everyone demands the same kind of goods that we've all got used to. I mean, the whole world can't end up being like Singapore.
Let's not have a discussion, please. Yeah. We're very short on time, so I'd just like to make sure that everyone finally gets to it.
Well, second, 3 falls or a knockout out.
Do you want to ask
very briefly? I have to make the same point as I made the question there. We will not get to such a society if people are going to not do those things. That is the whole point. We are asking people to change their consciousness now, to break out of their mindset that people are going to do this. We want to ourselves try to change the way we live now so that we don't become and are not grasping people. We will not reach a state where socialism is possible unless the overwhelming majority of people in the world are so transformed in their consciousness that the thought of taking more than they need would seem utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, I understand that, but now we do the menial jobs.
Well, the menial jobs, who does them in the family? We all do menial jobs. We all go and help people out. In the place where I live, in Woodcote, menial jobs are done by all of us to help people out. It's really not the problem you think. I saw this comedian once, and heard this comedian understand, he was talking about work, and he said how horrible it was, and how people went 9 to 5 or longer than that now, went 9 to 5, went break for 5 o'clock, and then at 9, the alarm went in the morning, he had to get up at blooming 9 o'clock every morning. And then he said, but what happens when you leave work? Oh, Mrs. Jones, she wants her toilet unblocking. I'll just go and do that. Well, it's only midnight, never mind, I'll go at it for a bit longer. It's a different concept. We help one another when the benefits of such cooperation reap happiness to us all.
Okay, there's a gentleman here. We're going to call a halt to questions in a moment, so if you could keep it brief, please.
It's just that a small footnote to your comments that if nations traded with each other, they wouldn't want to go to war. This is not true. There's ample evidence that Stalin's Russia did a lot of trade with Hitler's Germany. And one of the great unwritten pages in the history of the 20th century is the enormous amount of support that Nazi Germany received from the big American corporations. And of course, in the First World War, there was this story, I think it's true, that there was a small part of every rifle that was used by German infantrymen that had a British patent on it. And throughout the whole of the First World War, or a large part of the First World War, the German government paid these royalties in gold through neutral Holland to the British. So a lot of it did go on. And I don't think you can really support this idea that if countries traded with each other, that they weren't going to war. There was evidence also that the Texaco Oil Company was supplying Hitler with oil well after the declaration of war.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to address this question about war and trade and so on. And I personally misrepresented that. I think when individuals are trading over borders, I think it's a great incentive not to go to war. States go to war, governments go to war, and that's part of the problem. And we've got too much government in too many states, and that's it. So that's my view on that. I'll just close with maybe 4 points. Let me just say in advance of that again, thank you for your invitation. I feel that I am better informed, although, as you will tell me, and you will certainly tell me, I'm still very ill-informed about your beliefs and aspirations. And, well, I can only hope that you have a little more understanding of where I'm coming from. I'd just like to make 4 points, though, which I think are my problems about your point of view. Capitalism, like your view, capitalism informs me, let's say. I'm against monopoly. I'm against regulation. I'm against running politicians. I think there's too much politics and there's too much pushing people around. And most of that, it seems to me, comes from the public sector rather than the private sector. And I want a world in which people do indeed have access to resources, a world which is generating the wealth by which we can help people then who don't have much access to resources, and that we can bring new products and processes to the world's poorest. And I think that the capitalist system over the last 30 years has done that, and it has pulled billions of people out of poverty, and that is what has done it, and it hasn't been socialist approach. Secondly, just on the mechanics of your system, we talk about common ownership of means of production and everything else for that matter, but who decides? Who decides what's going to be produced? Who decides how it's going to be produced? I cannot subscribe to the sort of Marx idea that there's a sort of group consciousness and group will, and somehow we all know what needs to be done and needs to be produced. That's not true at all. There will be some people who say we ought to be doing this, others who say we ought to be doing that, and it's going to be a real conflict between them. And if it isn't a real conflict between them, then it isn't much of a debate. You're going to have a real conflict between them. And And that, I think, means that you've got a political system, however you look at it, you've got politics in this. And I think that politics is just incredibly corrosive. And that's another reason why I believe in a market system which I think avoids that kind of conflict. It's a cooperative system. We're all exchanging. And I think also that the economy that we have at the moment is extremely complicated. It is indeed not an agrarian economy. We may all be brothers. Yes, I agree. 99.999% of our DNA is identical. Indeed, 99.9% is identical with chimps and all the rest of it. But there are so many of us. It is a huge society. It's a huge, complex society. Everybody has different. We all have different skills, different attitudes, different wants, different needs. And getting that all together is not like being in a family and just saying, oh, well, you do this, Jack, and you do that, and we can share, or even in a prison where you can do this, where it's a smaller community. So you need a system which can actually allocate resources, produce and allocate resources over the whole globe. And that, to me, I think you need a capitalist system. You need a market system. I think my third point would be that your idea, I think we can't have enough information. You don't know. You say, well, we produce what people need. How do you know what people need? Unless they tell you somehow. If they go to a shop and they buy one thing instead of another, you know, right, that's what they want. And you say, we'll produce what people need. What about what people want? Okay, Victoria Beckham does not need a handbag that costs 12,000 quid, right? But she wants it. Well, if she thinks that's really important, why should I stop her, quite frankly? And we make progress by people wanting actually more than they need. I love my little iPhone. I think it's fantastic. Do I need it? No, really. I could get by without it, I'm sure. I think it's wonderful. And I think it's the sort of invention which we produce and which I want to actually see more of. And I want everybody to have an iPhone. I want everybody to have a Mac, not a PC. Not about what's his name, Bill Gates. So, how do we know what to produce? We only know what to produce if ordinary people have a choice and can select what is going to be produced. And that means you need a variety of production. You need people who are putting things on the market in the hope of making a profit from it. Yes, absolutely, but they only make a profit if they benefit somebody else as well. So that's the system. And I think that we're surrounded here by Darwin stuff. Technical socialists, you see, they're behind the times. The university's over. But we're surrounded by Darwin, and it is the market system. No. It's the market system is an evolutionary system where you're trying new products and processes all the time. People are coming up with new things, and they are left to the general public to decide whether they live or die. And that seems to be a system in which we make progress, in which we produce more things, we improve our standard of living, and in particular, in my outlook, that we improve the lot of currently the poorest people on the planet.
And for a nanosecond, he almost lapsed into a moment of revolutionary consciousness. Then he quickly backtracked. Alas, however, I have high hopes. I want to end this meeting by not answering all the points. I think we've given it all a good go. I want to talk about something that's very much on my mind all the time, and people say, how is that going to happen? One of the most, this is all a bit philosophical, and I apologise in advance, but I think it's worth saying. One of the most pernicious untruths ever perpetrated is that there exists some unbridgeable chasm between independence and cooperation. In socialism, strong, lively, independent individuals will understand very well that generous cooperation is a prerequisite for continual flourishing of the kind of community that would enable enable them to fully enjoy the freedom they desire. They surely will not choose to isolate themselves in the very community they have created. It is not free individuals who cause and practice the violence, corruption and greed that are inherent to capitalism, but those who are unfree. When human beings are free, they will possess a much greater awareness of choice and understand more profoundly the liberating dynamic of their creative potential. When this brilliant power that we all possess to energize our imagination is no longer frustrated, it will truly revolutionize our behavior. Socialists are certainly looking to the future, but we are not idle dreamers. Conscious idealism can inform and energize our practical living. Evolutionary consciousness is as much a part of where we are going as anything else. Still, in terms of evolution, we are babies in nappies, puking. We have got a long, long way to go, and sometimes, because of that, people lose sight of what is potentially possible. Bach wrote a lovely piece in part of his cantata called Wache auf, Sleepers Awake. But I don't believe that most people in the world are asleep. And Thoreau more wisely wrote, millions are awake, but only 1 in a million is awake enough. And that is the tragedy we face. We must learn, he says, to reawaken and keep ourselves awake by an infinite expectation of the dawn, which does not forsake us even in our soundest sleep. What a splendidly apposite paradox, that the sensible time to dream is when you are awake. Unlike the fanciful notion that a system based on exploitation and production for profit could do anything other than serve minority interests. The capacity to change is the trump card of the human species. Our consciousness is never fully asleep. Often it is mostly alive prior to sleep. And Siegfried Sassoon wrote a beautiful poem called Alone, in which he said, when we blow out the candle and we're in our bed, then the thoughts that we don't allow the world to enter go on and on and on, alive in our minds, and questions are asked. Maybe about love, or freedom, or peace, or loneliness, or isolation, or despair, or frustration, or alienation. Life-informed words that give depth, great depth, through personal experience, and compelling us to confront our fears and doubts and yearn for a greater understanding of ourselves. I'm going to finish with one of my favourite quotes of all time. And it's something that when I was feeling a bit down, I came back from the festival hall and I heard their fantastic performance of Beethoven's last piano sonata played by Brendan, one of my favourite pianists. And when I was on the train going home, in the programme, I read this inspiring statement. You know, not so many people are socialists, but the world, a possibility of living without profit or money and in cooperation, was dreamed of by Ovid. It was spoken of by Wilde, it was spoken of by poets, it's spoken of here by one of my favourites, A.S.J. Testament, which I won't have time to read to you. I just want to leave you with this inspiring quote from one of my great heroes, Ludwig van Beethoven. And it said in the programme, masterpieces of art are instilled with a surplus of constantly renewable energy, an energy that provides a motive force for change in relations between human beings, because they contain projections of human desires and goals which have not yet been achieved. Beethoven's last piano sonata is a monument to his conviction that solutions to the problems facing humanity lie ever within our grasp if they can be recognised for what they are and confronted by models of human confrontation. We believe those things as socialism. We believe in that human potential. We want those people partly awake to believe in themselves for the greatest destruction in the world, worse than starvation, worse than war, is the systematic destruction of people's confidence in their own ability to have the power to change the world in which they live, both by their behaviour, personally and political. And that is a conviction